Some expert insight into the state of Hollywood productions from Tom Ara. He's a partner at DLA Piper global law firm, where he's also the co-chair of the entertainment, finance and transactions practices. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, and nice to be back on again, Rachelle.
So as we saw some production talent leaving Hollywood for alternative locations and in sometimes different industries. Where did they mostly go, and are they all likely to return?
Well, we've definitely seen some participants in Hollywood leave town for a variety of reasons. Obviously, moving to locations that allow them to have greater mobility, or to be in a location where they're outdoors or things are more open or accessible. But I have to say that notwithstanding that, we have seen production and the Hollywood business come back in a pretty big way in the past few months.
And we did find that for a lot of us, sort of running out of material to watch as a lot of productions were shut down. So short of relocating, what other production workarounds has Hollywood tried over the past year?
Well, that's a great question. I'll begin by saying and quoting the great P.T. Barnum, who said, "The show must go on," and we've definitely seen the show continue. The workarounds have been mostly technologically driven. The advancements we've seen in computer-generated graphics have enabled productions to take place really anywhere, because these sets that are built around green screens and blue screens allow backgrounds to be designed basically to reflect any location in the world, and they are quite convincing. If any of your viewers are fans of shows like The Mandalorian, a great deal of the footage and the scenes and shows like that are on green screens and blue screens. They're not real places for obvious reasons. And so those types of technologies have been applied to even less futuristic type plot lines and stories, where we've seen normal backgrounds like cities and landscapes around the world being reflected in a virtual format.
Now let's look at other sorts of TV productions. For example, talk shows. We've seen some of these hosts in studio with perhaps one socially distanced guest at a time and virtual audiences, or even some of these hosts at home with no audience. Oprah even uses CGI tech to make it look like she and her guest are in the same place. But obviously this requires less production, though. Of all the approaches being used, what are the pros and cons of this for production companies?
Well, I think there has been some coming back from that. Obviously, immediately after the pandemic began, we had late night show hosts filming themselves from their living rooms or their home offices, and you know, their relatives holding the camera. I think we've come beyond that now, and because of the protocols that have been put in place by both the unions and the guilds, as well as the studios and the television networks, we've seen quite a bit of that come back. And even when production like that has taken place in locales that we otherwise wouldn't have thought of, people's living rooms or homes, there are production crews involved. Of course, maybe not to the same level that they may have been at a studio, but we are definitely seeing a return to those environments.
Now, I want to also talk about reality television. We saw a lot of in-home setups, self-shooting, filming in bubbles even. Talk about the impact on professional camera crews and audio techs, for example.
Well, look, I think the advent of user-generated content, so to speak, has really spread more wildly beyond just videos of people's animals playing with balls of yarn. We've seen everything from you know, shows really produced in a user-generated way, and now I think with the social video platforms taking a big part in the audience, from millennials in particular, we're going to see more of that. And you're correct that it will have an impact to some extent on professional production. But notwithstanding that, I have to say, with the insatiable appetite that audiences have for content these days on all the streaming platforms, I don't think that our industry is facing any shortage of work. In fact, quite the opposite.
Well, so then to that point then, speaking of work then, talk about the role of unions in keeping workers engaged and supported in the entertainment industry over this past year.
Well, that's a very important point to hit on, because the unions have played an integral role in obviously making sure that their members are safe when they're involved in any form of production, in any setting where they are with other individuals. And that process began very early on in the pandemic, and there was a great deal of collaboration and dialogue between the unions as well as the studios and production companies. And that has paid great dividends for the industry, because that collaboration led to various sets of rules and protocols to be followed, COVID protocols by the different participants to ensure the health and safety of the members of the industry. We have seen things such as COVID compliance officers becoming a daily part of a production's routine, and obviously also at a cost that is part now of the budgets of these projects. Also various types of protections put in place in the sets themselves, in areas like hair and makeup, dressing rooms, etc., have to be segregated in ways that probably were much more relaxed in the past.